Her daughter called her just the babysitter in front of the Christmas Eve guests. Emily didn't argue. She poured another glass of wine. By New Year's, the mortgage she'd been paying for years would be gone, and so would her children's names from her will. She'd spent decades as the silent giver. Now, she was the one taking back, and when they came asking what happened, the paperwork would be waiting. We're just getting started, but before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from? These stories aren't just mine, they're mirrors. Drop your city in the comments, and if you believe in second chances, hit subscribe. It was supposed to be a casual evening, but when Lily casually told me that Clara was just the babysitter we let stay, I felt my world shift. Emily pulled up to Lily's house, the bright Christmas lights twinkling in the darkening evening. The familiar feeling of family warmth reached out to her from the windows, but it felt hollow today, strange. She had been looking forward to this Christmas Eve, the chance to share an evening with the people she loved, but something was off. The weight of old feelings hung in the air, thick and unspoken. She rang the doorbell, her pulse quickening slightly. Lily opened the door, wearing a bright, almost too cheerful smile. "Emily, I'm so glad you made it," she said, stepping aside. Emily forced a smile in return, her nerves settling but only slightly. As she stepped into the house, she felt the usual sense of belonging that had always defined Lily's home, but today it felt like she was stepping into someone else's life, like an outsider. The house was beautiful as always, decorated with garlands, wreaths, and twinkling lights. Sam was in the kitchen. Lydia was wrapped up in a conversation with Clara, who Emily assumed had been invited as part of the festivities. They all seemed so natural together, like they were in their own world, and she was simply passing through. As they sat down to dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Everyone laughed and exchanged stories, as if it were a normal family gathering, but Emily felt the space between her and them grow wider with every passing second. And then casually, almost as if it was an afterthought, Lily spoke up. "Oh, Clara, just the babysitter we let stay for the evening." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. The casualness of them, the lack of consideration, they stung deeper than anything she had felt in a long time. Just the babysitter. Emily blinked, trying to hold it together. For a moment, the room seemed to blur around her. Was that really all she was? Just the guest, the outsider, trying to fit in while the people she loved made their home complete without her. Her mind swirled. This wasn't the first time she'd felt this way. Shut out, irrelevant. But tonight, it felt final. The weight of the years of neglect, of being the one left on the outside, pressed down on her chest, and in that moment, she realized it was no longer about being ignored or left out. It was about being invisible in her own family. Emily watched Sam and Lydia laugh, saw Clara settle comfortably into their dynamic, and she felt the invisible wall that had always been there, growing higher, thicker. The quiet sting of realization hit her hard. She wasn't even part of the conversation. She was the stranger in the room, the person who never quite belonged. The air seemed to thicken, suffocating her. She barely touched her food, her hands growing cold as she stared at the plate in front of her. How long had she been putting herself last? How many times had she tried to keep things together, to smooth over the cracks? She had been the one to help, to keep the family functioning, but it was always at the cost of her own needs, always at the cost of her voice. And now she was just the guest at the table, a guest in a family that wasn't hers anymore. The moment Lily spoke so casually about Clara, something inside Emily snapped. This wasn't just another slight. It was the final straw. Her silence, her compliance, her willingness to stay in the shadows. It wasn't enough. Not anymore. The dinner carried on, but Emily could no longer participate. The weight of the room, the heaviness of the atmosphere, it all began to suffocate her. She pushed her chair back quietly, excusing herself as she left the table. The cold air of the backyard felt like a reprieve. She stepped out into the night, the chill of Christmas Eve biting at her skin. She stood there for a moment, her breath coming in quick bursts, as she tried to gather her thoughts. The family she had tried so hard to be a part of, she didn't need them anymore. not in the way she had thought. This wasn't about their approval, their love, it was about her, finally taking control. Tonight Emily made a decision. The emotional weight of everything she had been carrying shifted inside her, and as she stared into the cold night, her words came softly, but with purpose. I won't be silent anymore. Emily looked back toward the warm glow of the kitchen window. Tonight was a turning point, but she couldn't help but feel the storm brewing inside her. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She would make sure of it. I've spent my whole life sacrificing for my son's future, but for what? To be dismissed for a babysitter. The drive back home was a blur of headlights and empty roads. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Her knuckles paled beneath the streetlights. The Christmas Eve dinner replayed in her mind like a movie she couldn't escape from. Every word Lily had casually thrown out about Clara, the babysitter, echoed in her head, a sharp reminder of everything she had sacrificed and everything that had been taken for granted. How had it come to this? The night had begun like any other Christmas Eve dinner, with festive music playing softly in the background, the smell of roasting meat filling the air, and the laughter of family. But it had all shifted when Lily made that offhand comment. It wasn't just about Clara being there. It was the realization that Emily had been sidelined, dismissed for years. All the holiday dinners, the birthdays, the quiet sacrifices of her time, money, and energy, they'd led to this moment, her invisibility. Emily's heart tightened as she thought of Sam and Lydia, of how they hadn't noticed, hadn't seen her. Not really. They had their lives, their families, and she had been nothing more than a footnote, a supporting character in their narrative. And now, she was expected to smile and fit in with their carefully curated picture of happiness, as if she wasn't a part of it at all. The more she thought about it, the more the anger began to build. Her eyes burned with tears she hadn't allowed to fall in front of. She had worked so hard, given so much, always for them, always for Sam's future. But what was the point? What had it all been for, if at the end of the day, she was nothing more than an afterthought? As Emily turned onto her street, she felt a deep sense of isolation settle over her. The sight of her house, so familiar, so empty, did little to ease the ache that had settled in her chest. She parked in the driveway, the engine's hum fading into the stillness of the night. She sat in the car for a few minutes, the engine off, the cold creeping in, but her thoughts racing. She had been there for them when no one else was. She had sacrificed so much of herself, so much of her life, to ensure Sam had everything he needed, to help him grow into the man he was. And for what? To be treated like a stranger, to be cast aside for a babysitter. The thought stung deeper with every passing second. She had worked herself to the bone for a legacy she now realized she didn't even want to leave. As she opened the door to the house and stepped inside, the emptiness swallowed her. The quiet was deafening. She couldn't even bring herself to turn on the lights. The flickering of the Christmas tree lights in the corner was the only illumination, but they felt cold, foreign. They no longer held any warmth, no longer symbolized the love and care she had put into this home. She sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the tree. It had all been for them, all of it, but now she saw it so clearly. She had poured everything into people who never truly saw her. She had been nothing more than the invisible caretaker in their lives, never fully appreciated, never fully understood. Her pulse quickened, her thoughts spiraling. How had she gotten here? She wasn't just angry at Sam or Lydia, or Lily. She was angry at herself for angry for letting herself be used and dismissed for so long. She had sacrificed for their happiness, their future. But what about hers? What had she given up to make sure they were okay? The idea of leaving everything to Sam, of continuing this pattern of silence, resentment, and neglect, made her stomach churn. The thought of passing on her wealth, her legacy to them, when they had never truly valued her, filled her with a deep, bitter resentment. She had worked hard for everything she had, and it wasn't just going to be taken for granted anymore. Emily stood up, her decision forming in the pit of her stomach. She walked toward the study, her fingers trembling as she opened the drawer. She pulled out the old will, the one that had always been in place, the one that left everything to Sam. She could no longer be the invisible figure in her own story, the legacy she was leaving behind. She needed it to be hers, and hers alone. It was time for a change. Time for a future that wasn't tied to the past. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision in her chest. The pen was in her hand, ready to strike a new course. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her life, her power and her future. With one swift motion, Emily crossed out the names in the will and replaced them with something else. A charity. A cause she believed in, one that mattered, something that would make a difference, something that would leave a true legacy, one that wasn't tainted by the sacrifices of the past. As she signed the new will, a sense of peace began to wash over her. She had taken control. She had decided that her legacy would be one of meaning and purpose, not an afterthought, not a footnote. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from her lawyer. "I've received your instructions. We'll begin the process immediately." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward her new life. But as she looked at the new will, the weight of her decisions settled deep within her. She was changing everything, her past, her future, and everything in between. Emily paused, staring at the screen. Something felt off. The message wasn't just business. There was something in the way it was worded, something that felt like a shadow was lurking in her future. What else was coming her way? "This isn't just about inheritance. It's about reclaiming my dignity." The soft glow of the desk lamp bathed Emily's study in an intimate light, casting long shadows against the walls. She sat at her desk, the papers in front of her now feeling more like a weight than a responsibility. The will, the future of her estate, was no longer just a matter of finance. It had become a battleground for her dignity, her autonomy, and the choice to finally reclaim what had been stripped from her for far too long. The faint hum of the house, settling around her, was the only sound in the room. It had been hours since she had finalized the new will, but she couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. As the decision had taken form, it had seemed so clear. Sam, Lydia, they didn't deserve any part of what she had worked so hard to build. She couldn't trust them. Not after everything, but still, as her eyes scanned the freshly signed document, she couldn't help but feel the gravity of what she had done. Emily leaned back in her chair, staring at the pages, her mind racing. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. It was about taking back her life. She had spent so many years sacrificing herself, living for others, pouring her energy into people who had never truly seen her. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about finally saying enough. But the silence of the room, the stillness of the night, left room for doubt to creep in. She had always been a mother first, a caretaker, a person who gave more than she ever took. Leaving Sam and Lydia out of her will felt like an unspoken rejection of everything she had taught them, everything they had come to expect from her. The thought of cutting them out entirely was painful. After all, they were her children, but that wasn't the truth she had to face anymore. Sam, Lydia, they had never truly appreciated her sacrifices. They had never fully understood the cost of the things she had done for them. Sam's expectations, Lydia's distance, it had all led to this. The family she had tried to create had never fully existed, and now she was free to make her own choices. As her fingers drummed lightly against the desk, Emily's thoughts turned to the future. If she didn't leave her wealth to them, then the charities she'd chosen felt like the right choice, a way to ensure that her wealth would go to something meaningful, something that mattered. But she wondered if that meant severing ties with her past forever. Was that what it took to reclaim her worth, to truly walk away from the people who had never given her the respect she deserved? The phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her lawyer, a simple notification confirming the receipt of her updated will. As she read the text, her pulse quickened. It was official now. Her decision had been made. There was no turning back. But as she sat there, the weight of her own resolve began to settle more heavily in her chest. Cutting Sam and Lydia out, it wasn't just about finances anymore. It was about making sure that her legacy wasn't defined by their neglect. It was about ensuring that the wealth she'd built was used in ways that truly mattered, in ways that honored the life she had lived, the struggles she had overcome. Still, Emily couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that this was the moment everything had changed. She looked at the clock, nearly midnight. The cold wind outside had picked up, rattling the windows. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the neighborhood, the soft glow of streetlights casting their own kind of shadow over the houses below. This was it. This was the moment that she would sever her ties, that she would reclaim what was hers. It wasn't just the wealth, it was the choice to stop being invisible, to stop being the person who silently endured. Emily took a slow breath and exhaled, feeling the weight of the decision settle into her bones. She had spent a lifetime keeping quiet, allowing others to take what they needed from her, but no longer. The decision was clear. It was time to start anew, and in doing so, she was giving herself the space to truly live for the first time. Emily reached for her phone and opened the message from her lawyer once more. "I've received your instructions. We'll begin the process immediately." She pressed her fingers to the screen, confirming her decision. She hit send. The finality of it sank in, deep into her chest. Emily felt her heart slow, the nerves beginning to settle. She wasn't just letting go of her inheritance. She was letting go of the old version of herself, the one who always put everyone else first. She was finally free. Just as Emily set her phone down, a knock came at the door. A soft, tentative sound. A knock that didn't belong at this hour. Could it be Sam? Could it be Lydia? The uncertainty settled heavily in her stomach as she moved toward the door, unsure of what or who awaited her on the other side. The knock at the door was soft, tentative, as though whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they had the right to be there. Emily's hand hesitated over the doorknob, her pulse quickening. She had expected something, but not this. She wasn't sure what this was, but she was certain it wasn't going to be good. She opened the door slowly, her breath catching as Sam and Lydia stepped into view. They were both dressed in the casual clothes of a Sunday afternoon, but the look in their eyes was far from casual. Sam's face was unreadable, his jaw set, while Lydia stood with her arms crossed, her lips pressed together tightly. Neither of them spoke, but the tension in the air was palpable. "What's going on?" Emily asked, trying to sound calm, though her voice betrayed her. Lydia stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "What's going on?" she echoed, the words sharp with disbelief. "You really don't know." Her voice trembled with a mixture of hurt and anger, but it was clear this wasn't just about the will. It was about something deeper, something that had been building for years. "You changed your will, Mom. You cut us out." Lydia's voice cracked, though she quickly regained composure. "After everything we've done for you, everything we've sacrificed, you do this." Emily stayed silent for a moment, staring at her daughter, letting the words sink in. She had expected this, but the weight of it still felt like a punch to the gut. Lydia's face was flushed with emotion, but it wasn't just anger that painted her features, it was betrayal. And that's what hurt most. It wasn't the anger. It was the look of a daughter who felt abandoned, a daughter who didn't understand. "You don't understand," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about money. It's about taking control of my life. I've spent so many years giving everything to you two, trying to make sure you were okay, trying to be the perfect mother. But where was I in all of that? I was invisible. My needs, my feelings, they didn't matter." Lydia scoffed, the disbelief clear in her eyes. "So now you're just going to throw us away, just like that?" Her voice was rising now, a mix of hurt and outrage. "You're making everything about you now, and that's selfish, Mom. It's selfish and manipulative." Emily's heart tightened. "You think this is selfish? You think I'm manipulating you?" Her voice didn't waver, though the words stung. "I'm finally doing something for myself. I've spent my whole life worrying about you both. It's time I worry about me." Sam hadn't said anything, his eyes on the floor, his arms folded tightly across his chest. Emily could feel his silence like a weight pressing down on her. She wanted to reach out to him, but she knew he was the one she couldn't reach. He was the one who had remained distant, quiet during every fight, every family gathering. It was always Lydia who spoke for both of them, and Sam just let her. But this silence, this absence of any defense or support, felt like the final betrayal. "Sam," Emily said, her voice shaking despite herself. "Say something. Don't just stand there. Do you even care?" His gaze flickered up to hers, but the words never came. He opened his mouth as though to speak, but closed it again, turning his eyes toward the floor. The sting of his silence hit harder than any words could have. Emily felt something inside her snap. She had always understood Lydia's anger. She had always been able to look past it, knowing there was love buried beneath it. But Sam's silence, it was a betrayal that Emily hadn't anticipated. This wasn't just about the will anymore. This was about everything she had done for them, everything she had given, and how it had never been enough. Lydia didn't give Emily a chance to process her feelings. She stepped forward again, eyes filled with fury. "We're your family, Mom. We've been here for you, and this is how you repay us?" Her words were almost a scream now. "You're cutting us out of your life like we don't even matter." Emily stood tall, refusing to let her own emotions take over. "I'm not cutting you out, Lydia. I'm taking back what's mine. I've given you everything for years, and I've been left with nothing. I've sacrificed everything for your future, for both of you, and for what? To be dismissed? To be invisible?" Lydia shook her head. "You're wrong, Mom. We've always been there for you." But there was a crack in her voice now, a vulnerability that Emily hadn't expected. "We're not perfect, but we've tried. Trying isn't enough," Emily replied, her voice softer now, though the firmness never left. "I needed you to see me, to hear me, and you didn't." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of the words hanging between them. Sam shifted uncomfortably, but still said nothing. Emily couldn't bring herself to look at him anymore. This silence, this avoidance, it was the last thing she could take. "I've made my decision," Emily said, her voice strong but hollow. "I've taken control of my life, and if that means I have to break free from you two to do it, then I will." The silence stretched on for a moment longer, before Lydia turned away. "I can't believe this," she muttered under her breath, but Emily heard the pain in her words. Sam looked at Emily, and for the first time that night, his voice broke through. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I never thought it would come to this." Emily's eyes met his, but the connection was broken. The rift had grown too deep. With that, Lydia stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Emily stood alone in the heavy silence, the weight of her choices settling on her shoulders. As Emily turned away from the door, her phone buzzed once more. She glanced at the screen. The message from her lawyer flashed up. A new message. "We've received a request from Lydia. She wants to contest the will. She's preparing to take legal action." Emily froze, staring at the screen. She had expected anger. She had expected hurt. But this was war. Emily sat in the dimly lit living room, the weight of the decision still pressing down on her shoulders. She had hoped that once she made her choice, once the will was signed, a sense of peace would follow. But instead, she felt a constant buzz of unease in the pit of her stomach, like the aftershocks of an earthquake that wouldn't settle. Sam and Lydia's anger hadn't dissipated, and it had only grown more insistent as the days passed. The phone calls, the texts, they didn't stop. And now, Lydia had escalated things further, by requesting legal action. The sound of the message buzzing through her phone had felt like a bomb going off in the quiet of her house. She had expected anger from them, but this was something different. Lydia's anger wasn't just about the money. It was about her sense of betrayal, her belief that Emily had turned her back on the family. Emily couldn't ignore the depth of Lydia's hurt, but it wasn't the only feeling swirling inside her. There was something else, something darker. The guilt that she had made this decision in the first place. Guilt that Sam and Lydia, her own flesh and blood, would be hurt by the very choices she made to protect herself. But when the cold, rational voice of the lawyer echoed in her mind, Emily knew she couldn't go back. She had to be strong. She had to take control. Yet as the days dragged on, it was harder to ignore the weight of the conflict. She kept thinking about Sam's situation, the mounting debts, his lack of financial responsibility, the strain on him and Lydia as they tried to build a life. The guilt twisted in her chest. She had spent years supporting Sam, sacrificing for his future. But had she done it for the right reasons? Was it truly for him, or for the image of him she had created in her head? Lydia's face flashed in her mind, her anger burning like a bright fire. But there was something else in her expression now. Vulnerability, maybe even fear. Emily had never seen Lydia like this before. Never seen her so desperate. Was she doing the right thing by cutting them out of her life? Could she really walk away from everything they had shared, no matter how broken? As Emily pulled her knees closer to her chest on the couch, her thoughts kept coming back to Sam. The way he had looked at her, his eyes searching for something understanding. But when his silence had crushed her, that had been the breaking point. Now he was the one who wanted to meet, to talk. Could they still salvage their relationship? Or was this the final rupture? Her phone buzzed again, a text from Sam. She hadn't been able to bring herself to read his last few messages, afraid of what they might contain. But now the words felt like a physical weight. Mom, I need to talk to you, please. This can't just end like this. We can figure it out. We always have. I'm still your son. Emily's breath caught. She stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling her heart thud painfully in her chest. She had always been the one to sacrifice, to put everything into making sure Sam was okay. But now, as his words echoed in her mind, she realized something. She didn't owe him everything. She owed herself too. Still, there was a part of her, her mother's heart, that wanted to believe him. The old patterns of guilt and obligation rose up, whispering in her ear. How could she turn her back on him now? How could she shut him out when he was reaching out, asking for a chance? She opened the message and began to type a response, her fingers trembling over the keys. We need to talk, she wrote back, then paused, second-guessing herself. Was she doing the right thing? Was it even possible to come back from this? Before she could hit send, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Sam's name flashed on the screen. Emily's heart skipped a beat, her breath catching in her throat. She knew what was coming. She had to answer. Mom, can we meet? Sam's voice was softer than she had ever heard it, the edges of his usual bravado stripped away. There was something raw and unguarded in the way he spoke now, something that made her want to believe he was truly trying to make amends. But her mind kept drifting back to the silence from earlier, to the hurt she couldn't erase. I don't know, Sam, Emily said, her voice steady but filled with an underlying uncertainty. I don't know if we can just go back to what we were. Things have changed. The silence on the other end was thick, but she could hear him take a shaky breath. I don't want to lose you, Mom. Please let me fix this. Let me show you that I'm trying. Let me show you that I can be better. His words were everything she had longed to hear for so many years, but now they felt like an echo of what she had always hoped for. Was it enough? Could she believe him? And at what cost? I'm not sure, Sam, she replied quietly. I need time. This isn't just about the money. It's about something more. I'll wait, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll wait as long as it takes. The call ended, and Emily stood there staring at the phone in her hand. Her mind was spinning. She had thought this decision would be the one to set her free, but now it felt like she was caught between two impossible choices. Was it worth risking everything to hold on to her dignity? Could she really walk away from her son, her family for the sake of herself? The weight of the choice pressed down on her. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life, but now she faced the hardest decision of all. Could she really sever the bond with her own son? She looked at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keys once again. Cliffhanger. The phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Sam. It was Lydia. Mom, we need to talk. You need to listen to me. This isn't over yet. Emily sat alone at the kitchen table, the faint glow of the lamp casting long, solitary shadows across the room. Her fingers drummed absently on the wooden surface, the rhythmic tapping a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions brewing inside her. The weeks since she'd made the decision to change her will had passed in a blur of sleepless nights, heated confrontations, and endless moments of self-doubt. The weight of the decision, and the consequences it had unleashed, pressed on her chest like a vice. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, the notification was from the media. A new article. Another attack on her character. She could already feel the heat rise in her cheeks, her pulse quickening as she read the headline, "Emily Johnson, a family betrayal for financial gain." Her stomach churned, the bile of anger and frustration rising within her. She had anticipated some backlash. What choice did she have? But this felt different. It was as though every inch of her had been torn open and exposed for the world to see, judged and condemned by people who didn't know her. The comments on the article were a mixture of harsh judgments and relentless questions. How could she cut her children out of her inheritance? What kind of mother does that? They didn't know. They couldn't know. Emily's eyes stung with unshed tears, but she blinked them back. This was the cost of standing firm, of reclaiming her life. She couldn't back down now. No matter how deep the isolation, no matter how loud the voices of those who wanted to tear her down, she couldn't let them make her small again. Her phone buzzed once more. Another text, this time from her lawyer. "We've received additional motions from Lydia's attorney. They're pushing for a more aggressive case. But don't worry, we've got this. Your stance is strong." She clutched the phone tighter, forcing herself to breathe. The case was strong. Yes. But the cost? She wasn't sure how much longer she could endure this fight. The anxiety in her chest grew with each passing day. Friends who had once supported her now avoided her calls. The whispers of judgment following her wherever she went. Family gatherings that once felt warm and full of love now felt suffocating, like she was trapped in a room full of strangers. Was it worth it? Was the pain of this battle worth the price she was paying? The phone buzzed again, but Emily didn't want to look at it anymore. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, letting the weight of the silence fill her. The stillness in her own home was almost as suffocating as the noise outside it. She had spent so many years sacrificing herself for others, her children, her family, her responsibilities, all for a legacy she now realized was built on the wrong foundation. She had tried to be the perfect mother, the perfect caretaker, the perfect provider, but in doing so she had forgotten herself. What did it mean to stand her ground, if the very act of doing so pushed her away from everything she had ever known? Was the inheritance just money, or was it about something deeper, something more essential? Her thoughts began to blur, the edges of her resolve fraying as the internal conflict took hold. Could she walk away from the people she loved? Could she really leave Sam and Lydia behind? Would she lose her family forever if she continued down this path? She opened her eyes and looked out the window, the quiet darkness of the night stretching out before her like a void. The streetlights glowed faintly in the distance, their light flickering uncertainly, just like her own thought. It wasn't just about the money, not anymore. Emily sat up straighter, her hand gripping the edge of the table as the realization hit her like a jolt of electricity. She wasn't fighting for money. No, this was about something else. This was about reclaiming her identity, her sense of self-worth. It was about stopping the cycle of sacrifice, of being unseen, of being pushed aside. It was about taking control of her life for the first time in decades. The fight, painful as it was a fight for the woman she had lost along the way. The woman who had been hidden behind the roles of mother, caretaker, and provider. The woman who had been smothered by expectations, by guilt, by love twisted into obligation. She wasn't fighting for her inheritance anymore. She was fighting for herself. With a deep breath, Emily stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the world beyond. The choices she had made had set this storm in motion, and now, no matter what happened, she was committed to seeing it through. The journey had already cost her more than she could have imagined, but it had also opened her eyes to something she had never fully grasped, her own power. And that power? It was hers to wield. Just as she was about to turn back to the table, her phone buzzed again. It was another message, this time from Sam. "Can we please talk? I'm sorry. This is bigger than just the money, it's about us. I'm not ready to lose you, Mom." Emily stood still for a moment, her heart a tight ball of conflicting emotions. Sam's words felt like a lifeline, a way back, a chance for reconciliation. But was reconciliation possible? Or was this just another attempt to keep her in the same old patterns? Emily stared at the message, her finger hovering over the reply. Could she trust Sam again? And if she did, what would it cost her? The weight of the battle was starting to feel unbearable. Emily sat at the kitchen table, the steady hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. Her fingers were trembling as she flipped through the thick stack of papers from her lawyer, the documents she had been poring over for days. Every word felt like it was etched into her soul, each one a reminder of how deeply her family's dispute had infiltrated her life. The legal battle with Lydia had escalated quickly, and now it felt as though every corner of her life was under siege. Lydia's lawyers were relentless, digging up every shred of information they could to make her look like a villain in the court of public opinion. The media coverage was relentless. Headlines screamed about her greed and betrayal, and every comment thread felt like a personal attack. She couldn't escape it. Everywhere she went, people were whispering, judging, tearing her apart from the inside out. Her phone buzzed again, another notification from the press. She opened it without thinking, her heart sinking as she saw the new headline, "Emily Johnson faces public backlash after will controversy, family divided over inheritance." The weight of it hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't prepared for the pressure, for the emotional toll this fight would take on her. She had thought she was ready. She had convinced herself that she was strong enough to face whatever came her way, but the reality was different. The stress was eating away at her, little by little every day. Her friends, the ones who had once offered her support, were beginning to take sides. Some had already distanced themselves, too uncomfortable with the idea of her fighting her own children. Others had reached out with sympathy, but with that same underlying judgment that made Emily feel as if she was the one in the wrong. She rubbed her temples, the headache persistent and familiar now. She had never been someone to back down, but the cost of standing her ground was becoming more apparent with each passing day. Her skin had become paper thin, and everything from the media to the whispers behind her back was starting to break through. She had lost her sense of peace, the quiet stability she had fought so hard to protect. The phone buzzed again. It was a text from her lawyer. "We've filed our response to Lydia's motions. The case is solid, but it's going to take longer than expected. The media storm will likely intensify. Stay focused. We're in the final stretch." Her eyes scanned the words, but her mind couldn't latch onto them. She had to be focused. She had to stay strong. Her lawyer's assurances felt distant, almost robotic in their calmness, but Emily could feel the toll this was taking on her health. Her body was exhausted, her nerves frayed, she hadn't slept properly in days, and every moment of quiet in her house only amplified the noise in her head. The battle had already stretched on longer than she anticipated, and the constant barrage of attacks on her character was wearing her down. She was no longer just fighting for her inheritance, she was fighting for her dignity, her right to make her own choices without the weight of guilt or obligation. But the longer the fight dragged on, the more Emily realized something. The price of standing up for herself might be higher than she had ever imagined. Her gaze drifted to the clock on the wall. The court hearing was scheduled for the following week, the final stage in a battle that had already consumed months of her life. Emily wasn't sure what to expect, if she would win, if she would lose, or if the outcome would even matter anymore. All she knew was that this fight had already taken everything from her, and yet she couldn't stop now. She had made her choice. She was going to see it through, no matter what the cost. The doorbell rang, a sudden sound that jerked Emily out of her thoughts. She froze for a moment, unsure of who it could be at this hour. The last few weeks had been filled with unexpected visits and confrontations, but she hadn't been expecting anyone tonight. The bell rang again, this time more insistent. Emily pushed herself up from the table, her legs unsteady as she crossed the room. As she opened the door, she saw Sam standing on the doorstep, his face drawn and weary. He hadn't called ahead, hadn't even sent a message. Just stood there, as if unsure of what to say, what to do. She stared at him, feeling the space between them stretch out. 1,000 unspoken words hung in the air between them, suffocating in their weight. "I need to talk to you," Sam said, his voice rough, hesitant. Emily's heart skipped. She hadn't been prepared for this. Another conversation, another plea. It felt like everything in her life had been building to this moment, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face him again, to face what this fight had done to their relationship. She stood there in silence, the weight of the situation pressing in. Could she even hear him anymore? After everything that had happened, after all the pain, could they really rebuild anything between them? Or was this just another attempt to pull her back into the cycle of guilt and obligation? Emily's fingers hovered over the doorframe, her heart racing. She was ready to face whatever came next, but was she ready to face Sam? Would this conversation be the one to break her, or the one that finally set her free? Emily stood at the door, her heart a chaotic mess of emotions. Sam's face, drawn, tired and vulnerable, was staring back at her. The years of sacrifice, the endless battle for respect, the silent grievances, all seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog, and she could barely breathe through it. "Please, Mom," Sam's voice cracked, softer than it had ever been. I need to talk. I need you to know that I've messed up, that I see it now." Emily felt the heavy pull of his words, the familiar tug of a mother's heart, one that had always been willing to forgive, always been ready to step in and make things right. But this time something was different. She wasn't sure if she could, or if she even wanted to, go back to the way things were. She stepped aside, letting him into the house. The cold night air had already clung to her, but she still felt a chill as she led Sam into the living room. He sat on the couch, his shoulders slumped, his gaze shifting between her and the floor. The silence between them stretched, both of them knowing that this conversation was going to decide everything. Lydia arrived shortly after, her usual defensive posture in place, arms crossed, lips pressed into a hard line. The warmth of family, once so familiar and comforting, now felt like an impenetrable barrier. Emily noticed the tense energy in the room, the way they avoided eye contact. It was as if this conversation had already been lost before it even began. Lydia was the first to break the silence. "You can't just walk away from everything we've built, Mom," she said, her voice laced with anger. "How can you expect us to move forward when you've cut us out? How can you turn your back on your own family?" Emily stood across from them, hands clasped in front of her. Her heart ached as she looked from Sam to Lydia. She had expected this, the pushback, the anger, but it didn't make it easier. The weight of their words felt suffocating. But this time, she wasn't backing down. She had given enough, sacrificed enough. "I haven't walked away from anything," Emily said, her voice low but firm. "I've been there my whole life, putting everything I had into making sure you were okay, but it's never been enough, has it? I've been invisible to you both, for too long, and I can't keep doing this. Not for you, not for anyone. It's time I do something for myself." Lydia scoffed, her eyes blazing. "This isn't about you, this is about us, about our future." She stood up, pacing, the anger rolling off her in waves. "You're not the only one who's been struggling. We've all had to fight to get by. You can't just pull the rug out from under us because of some selfish idea of reclaiming yourself." Emily's chest tightened. The words hit harder than she expected, but they also pushed her further into her resolve. She had spent so many years fighting for their future, and yet all she had received in return was neglect, misunderstanding, and now this. Lydia was right. She wasn't the only one struggling. But Emily had never asked for sympathy, never asked to be the one carrying the weight. She had done it because she believed it was the right thing to do, the thing a mother should do. "But you don't get it," Emily said, her voice breaking through the tension. "I've spent my life fighting for you both, but when you only take and never give, when you never even see the person who's been there for you all along, it's suffocating. I've given up everything for your futures, for the illusion that one day it would matter, but it never did. And now I have to make sure that the legacy I leave is mine, not one built on guilt and sacrifice. Sam finally looked up at her, his expression conflicted. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly, his voice raw. I didn't see it, okay? I didn't understand what you were doing. All I saw was someone who always fixed things, who always made it better, and I took it for granted. But I don't want to lose you. Please, don't let this be the end. Emily's throat tightened as she met Sam's gaze. For a moment, she felt that familiar pull in her heart, the one that had always begged her to fix everything, to make him see, but she couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't be the one to carry their burdens, to make the decisions, to be the savior. You're asking me to fix everything again, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I can't. I've tried, Sam, I've tried for years, and I'm not doing it anymore. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Lydia's anger was still palpable, but Sam looked broken. He didn't say anything else. He just stared at her, his eyes wide, filled with the unspoken words he couldn't bring himself to say. Emily took a step back, her body aching from the weight of everything. I'm not asking you to understand, I'm asking you to respect my decision. For once, let me do something for myself. Lydia shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. You're making a mistake, Mom. This is going to ruin us. You can't just walk away from everything. We're your family. Emily's heart cracked, but she stood her ground. I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking away from the idea that I have to keep giving everything I have, just to be loved. I'm done being the person who sacrifices herself for others. The room was heavy with unsaid words, with the enormity of the situation. Sam and Lydia were hurting, but Emily was hurting too. But her pain was different. It was a pain she had lived with for so long, a pain of being unseen, unappreciated. The conversation had taken a turn she hadn't expected, but the decision was clear. I've made my choice, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. This is who I am now. I can't change that. There was a long pause. Sam and Lydia didn't move. They were lost in their own pain, their own confusion. But Emily, she had found something in herself that she hadn't realized was there before. And no matter what happened next, she was going to hold on to it. She turned away, the door closing softly behind her, leaving Sam and Lydia behind. As she stepped back into the quiet of her home, Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Another message from her lawyer. The hearing is set. The battle begins. Emily stood in the hallway, phone in hand, the weight of what was to come settling on her shoulder. Would she finally be able to take control? Or would this battle break everything she had left?